Hi folks, and welcome to another episode of Careers and Coffee. I'm absolutely delighted to be welcoming our new chair, CJ Green. So CJ is the chair of New Anglia Local Enterprise Partnership, and she's also a director of BraveGoose. I'm going to be on best behaviour because she's the top banana. So I'm going to welcome CJ.
Hi Jordan, nice to see you today.
Likewise, how are you doing?
Yeah, good, thank you. Even though it's quite gloomy outside, I'm happy.
Yes, it is looking a bit dreary out there. I'm going to ignore the weather. We've got, essentially, have we got coffee? That's most important.
Definitely, here I am.
See, I like folks prepared in Careers and Coffee. Now, let's talk a little bit more about you. So I talked about there's chair of New Anglia Lab, and you're also director of BraveGoose. Tell me a little bit more about those roles.
So I took over as chair of New Anglia LEP a few weeks ago. So you're kind of one of my early LEP chair interactions. So got the best in first, Jordan, for sure. And I joined the board in the spring. So I've been kind of quietly transitioning under the radar to kind of take over from Doug. So that's kind of my LEP chair hat. And then with my BraveGoose hat, I'm a co-founder of a HR technology application business, and we are kind of in startup. So we're a year old, so really new business.
Blimey, so plenty to keep you on your toes then.
Yes, busy is the word, I think.
Tell me about what's it like joining an organisation and sort of transitioning into a new chair role during COVID, when you can't just pop into the office and have a coffee with someone?
Yeah, it's unusual, and I have never had so many meetings with my slippers on or my dog next to me, and it's quite bizarre that my first board meeting is actually next week, and I haven't actually yet been in a room with all of the board. So whilst I've met them all online a number of times, I've never physically been in a room with a lot of the people. So it's quite a unique experience, but there are plenty of people across the country having quite similar, very unusual and unique experiences. And I think it's going to be a time we all look back and go, gosh, that was odd.
Yeah, I can imagine. And you've got something to relate to the rest of the board members. I'm sure they're all in slippers as well. So,
yeah.
And tell us a little bit more about BraveGoose as well.
So BraveGoose is a HR technology application, and the whole purpose of CleverGoose, which is the name of our tech product, is it is designed to take away all of the headache of the people decisions you have to make. So every time you need to discipline someone, manage their absence, go through redundancy processes, our CleverGoose application walks you through every step of the way. And I think it's quite exciting that is underneath every action that you're taking and every question you interact with, it's calculating what risks might be there for you that you haven't yet spotted. And then it gives you a lovely kind of report. You can send automatic letters and you can diarise everything you need to do. So I'm a HR professional by trade for my sins. And actually, I think a lot of the HR stuff can be quite kind of transactional and a little bit kind of gnarly and yucky. And if you can get that stuff sorted by a wonderful app like CleverGoose, then you can do the really interesting stuff, which is kind of leveling up your people and really enabling your workforces. So I won't talk too much about it because I do get rather excited, Jordan.
I like it. How do you balance being sort of chair of the lab, but also running quite a massively busy business? How do you find the time for it all?
I think I've got a strange addiction to being busy. So I've always quite enjoyed filling my world with stuff. So it's not kind of unusual for me to be kind of quite energized and busy and lots going on. But I think, in any business, in any organization, anything you connect with, it's all about people. And I think if you give people time and empower people and kind of, work well with them, it's just a case of doing stuff that you find energizing, because you don't feel busy if you're doing what you love, do you? So I don't feel like that, because I think my business is effectively my hobby, and the LEP is so interesting. So I don't ever feel like, oh my goodness, this is hectic.
That's a very good point. I definitely agree with that. So we sort of know what CJ's up to at the moment, but let's rewind the clocks a little bit back when CJ was at school. What was school like for you? What careers advice did you get? I'm sure, back then you weren't thinking, yeah, one day I'm definitely going to be the chair of the lab. So, what was school like for you?
It would be really odd if I had, actually. I wish I could say I had. So yeah, I loved school. So I kind of was a bit of a kind of book reader geek type. So I kind of had a good time in school and really enjoyed it. When it comes to careers advice, I don't actually remember getting any. I'm sure there must have been some, but I don't remember it. So it clearly wasn't anything that I particularly wanted to do. I remember my English teacher telling me I'd probably write a book one day, which I haven't yet, but that's as much as I can remember about predictions about my future when I was at school.
Blimey. You talked about there sort of being a bookworm. Is there anything you're reading at the moment that you'd recommend?
There is this, I'm not reading it at the moment, but the book I recommend to absolutely everybody is a wonderful, wonderful book called Quiet by Susan Cain. And it's about the power of introverts in an extrovert world. And I think if there's one book I could pinpoint that fundamentally shifted the way I think about leadership, the way I think about how we get the best out of people in organizations, it's that one. And so I would 100% always recommend it. It's a phenomenal book. And really, you read it and you think, God, the way the world is set up is really only kind of for one sort of individual to succeed. And it really is incumbent on all of us as leaders to make sure we're thinking differently about that.
Right. That sounds like a good book.
So read it. Do it.
That's on the to-do list, right? I'm on that. Now, I want to just come back to the LEP as well. So, what attracted you initially to joining the LEP, aside from the wonderful Enterprise Adviser Network team?
Obviously. I think one of the things that's interesting is that, I've been in the region for kind of a number of years. And, I had my head down inside the business I was working in. And I was very much about my own industry, my own profession, still enormously busy. And I kind of, when I decided that I wanted to start up the HR tech business, I kind of remembered feeling like, gosh, there's all of this really amazing business activity that goes on in this region that I haven't been connected with previously and I didn't know anything about. And so I kind of made a commitment that in my new world and my new life, which is a co-founding tech entrepreneur, I would also be strongly connected into the region and the community where I was living and working, because that's something I hadn't really been intentional about previously. And I think it for me going forward, for my future, that was something I was kind of like, that's a new commitment I really want to make. So that was when I first started kind of an awareness of the LEP and the work and the reach that it does. And I started having some conversations and I thought, gosh, this place has an inspiring aspiration to connect people and business and what an interesting organization to be part of.
So we've just got a question in. How do you envision linking schools and local businesses together?
I think the more that we can have business people going into schools and spending time kind of giving their skills and advice and guidance and experiences, the better. And so I think the more that we can do that through kind of partnership organizations, through the different networks that we have that are connected to the LEP would be amazing. But I think it works both ways as well. So I think business people can learn a lot from the other way around. So going and hearing from young people about what their aspirations are, what they're looking for from the future of their employers, is enormously helpful because it helps employers set up for the future. So I don't think we should always think of it as business people going and downloading to young people in schools. I think business people need to learn from young people in schools about what the future workforce might look like for them.
Yeah, 100% agree with that. And I think you can learn so much from young people in schools. I think sometimes they don't have the tunnel vision that sometimes we have when you're just head down working on your project. You go in, you give them a project, boom, they come up with ideas that you wish you thought of months, if not years ago. So
100%.
Now, I want to come on to talking a little bit about, I suppose, your career at the moment. So previously, you used to be chief exec of a huge global firm, I think over 20,000 people in terms of a workforce. and now you're working on BraveGoose, small SME. How's that transition been? Because talk to me about it.
Yeah, it's different, really different. So I guess it's a bit of a culture shock in the beginning, because you go from being part of a board of directors in a large organization. There's teams of people to do stuff, and if you don't know the answer, you've got teams around you that do. But actually, in terms of how exciting it is, kind of startup life is pretty cool. And the thing that's wonderful is when you're connected to organisations like the LEP and the Growth Advisors and Best East and all of those wonderful programs that we've got going on, actually there is a huge amount of support around you. So it is really, really different. But it's kind of challenging in a very different way. And I would say to anyone who thinks about, could I make it or give it a go, you definitely should, because it's the most fun you'll ever have.
I mean, what have been some of the opportunities and challenges that have came out of it?
Well, a global pandemic has been one of them. So in our first year of business, we were a startup midway through a very exciting phase, about to kind of launch our tech into the world, and the pandemic hit. So we did a lot of fast pivoting and that sort of activity that a lot of business will have gone through. We feel really blessed that we were in a lucky position that actually we've survived, and we've made a few tweaks. We've probably accelerated the development of our technology faster than we would have if we weren't in lockdown for part of it. So that the biggest challenge for us has been that it has been very different being in the pandemic circumstances. But I think I'm lucky that my business partner and myself are very glass half full people. So we go, imagine a story we can tell a few years from now, that our first year we survived a pandemic, and this is what we learned from it, and this is how we changed our business. So we've gone, let's just roll our sleeves up and get stuck in and get on with it.
Good attitude. Now, I want to talk a little bit more about young people in the region, because they'll be facing a huge challenge moving forward. We've seen the stats in terms of unemployment for, so if we've got 16 to 24-year-olds. What advice would you give to young people who are about to embark upon their next pathway, and also the skills you look for as an employer within your own organisations as well?
So my answer to those is massively linked, actually. And so the thing I look for, and not just in young people, in anyone, but the thing I look for is courage. Because if you have the courage to try something new, you have the courage to learn a new skill, or you're facing something you've never done before, I think there's nothing more impressive than people who don't know the answer but have the courage to try. And so I think to young people, I just think, whilst it feels like the world is very difficult at the moment and there is an enormous amount of challenges to be faced, I think have courage to face them, because actually out of adversity comes some really great inspiration sometimes. I read an amazing article a couple of weeks ago that was about the Roaring '20s, that actually after the big recession, the Roaring '20s brought about some of the biggest innovation that the world had seen. And I think we're about to face something similar. So I think if we can keep open minds, we can transform our businesses, we can think about workforce of the future in a very different way, then anything is possible. So I would say always have an open mind and have courage. Those are the things I would advise people.
Brilliant. I mean, do you wish you sort of had that advice back when you were, say, 16, 17?
Kind of. I guess I have always felt like anything's possible anyway. If you want something enough, I think it's possible. You've just got to, it might not look exactly how you envisage it in your head. Your world might not pan out exactly as you want it to, but the world has a funny way of making things go the right way in the end, I think. So I think it's about, having courage and faith in yourself. I think you've got to back yourself a little bit.
Brilliant. Thank you. And we've talked a little bit about COVID. What are some of the LEP's plans moving forward to be able to support businesses and individuals across Norfolk and Suffolk?
Yeah, so the LEP has got a huge range of activity going on around kind of restart and recovery. The Young People Pledge is a huge part of that. It's, everybody has access to skills, everyone has the opportunity to be able to kind of advance themselves. From a business support perspective, we've got an enormous amount of kind of activity going on. The Growth Hub and Business Adviser Network is working so hard to make sure that businesses have access to all the information they need, that they can kind of work through if they're kind of pivoting their organizations. There's grants and funding available for people to kind of tap into to enable them to make some of those kind of quite unusual decisions that we wouldn't have had to make if we hadn't have gone through what we've all just been through together. So, to anyone who's thinking, could the LEP help me on my business in what we're kind of facing at the moment, the answer is almost definitely yes, because there's so much activity happening.
Brilliant, thank you. And obviously, folks, go onto the LEP website. So I also want to talk a little bit more about running and marathons. Now, I know that you do marathons. I also do marathons, but they tend to be sort of in the form of pub crawl. But, you're doing actual ones. So tell me about that. Do you sort of run every day? What's it like?
I don't normally run every day. So normally my training schedule is 3 days of running a week and 2 days kind of gym work a week. But this year, I stupidly, on New Year's Day, agreed with my husband that we would run 365 days this year. And so the rules were, you have to run every single day of the year, and the minimum you can run is a mile. So it has always got to be more than a mile. So some days I run more and some less, but this year it's been every single day. And I have cursed the day we had that conversation. But the trouble is, when you're over 6 months into that and you've done every day, you can't skip a day, because who would do that? So yeah, I'm looking forward to the 31st of December, that's for sure.
I mean, I couldn't run a bath, so that's brilliant. Okay, so we've just got a question. So what have been some of the biggest challenges or failures that have taught you the biggest lessons?
The biggest challenge, that's interesting. My career has been as a HR professional, and I kind of have always been in the people side of business. And I was a chief people officer on a board of directors. And at the time we had about 14,000 people in the business. And then I succeeded as kind of CEO. And I thought, when I was the people person on a board of directors, that I had an understanding and scope and, could see the breadth and depth of the organization. I think there is something really uniquely different about being part of a board or being the chief exec. And I suppose that transition, and I liken it in a very flippant way to the difference between being in kind of taking your GCSEs and then going on to A levels. You kind of think, oh, it's just like the next level up, but it just feels so vastly different. And that was a real eye opener for me. And it kind of, but I think the interesting thing about that is, I think that when you know less about something, you're prepared to collaborate more because you don't know all the answers. So when it was my profession, that was the job that I did, I kind of knew it inside out. But as soon as I stepped into something I knew less, I was prepared to ask for help more, which is interesting.
Brilliant. Before I come on to that one, if there's any young people who are watching this or watch it back and they want to pursue a similar pathway to you in terms of HR, technology, board roles, what would your advice be to them?
So my advice would be, build your network now when you don't need it for when you will need it, because there is your ability to listen and learn from others is one of the most important skills you will ever have. And you can, your education is sure important and, try hard and all of that kind of stuff. But there is nothing that's more powerful than your ability to connect and hear what people are saying and learn from them. So have humility, build your network, but build it for what you can give them as well as what they can give you. You know, I am a firm believer in reciprocity, and, you know, go out there and find what you can give others as well as the other way around.
Great advice, thank you. Okay, I'm going to come on to the next question. So we hear a lot about resilience being one of the most important skills for people in the workforce to have nowadays. How would you advise a young person to start to acquire that skill?
So resilience is a funny one, because I think a lot of people think resilience means that you have like a stiff upper lip and you can just get through anything. Actually, resilience is about your ability to bounce back. So I think sometimes we put a lot of pressure on ourselves to say, actually, if I'm having a really tough day and I'm struggling, that means I'm not resilient. But your ability to say, okay, I'm feeling the tough stuff and I'm figuring out how I kind of take another step forward, even though it's tough for me. That's what resilience is. So young people trying to acquire resilience as a skill means you accept the days that it isn't 100% perfect. And you go, okay, how do I get up tomorrow and have a different day? So it's as basic as that, really. So I would say just take time to think about how you're responding to what's going on around you and be really intentional about what you're going to do differently tomorrow.
Brilliant, thank you. Cool. Another question. So what piece of advice would you go back and tell 14-year-old CJ?
Oh my goodness, that is a good question. 14-year-old CJ. I'd probably say, it's less advice actually. I'd probably say, hi, I'm CJ of the future, and you're really lucky that we're in some kind of time traveling scenario. Here's some lottery numbers, and like always have fun and always be yourself. So I think I'm lucky in that I kind of learned quite early on that that's okay. But I think particularly in the business world, I think as you progress, people start to pretend to be someone different. And I think what makes you unique is you. And so just always be you. And you know, if it doesn't fit and it doesn't work in the environment you're in, your environment's wrong, not you. So I would kind of say, just hold on to who you are and stick with it.
Right, 14-year-old CJ is very lucky with advice like that. Okay, so another question. So if someone is interested in a career in HR, would you recommend to them to go to university or choose a different path? If they go to university, which degree would you choose?
Again, another good question. So I think the world is fantastic now in that the breadth of choices there are for young people are much better than they were when I was kind of choosing what I wanted to do. I think the apprenticeship route is really, really well suited to HR, because actually some of the best skills you learn when you're in workplaces. And you're able to kind of do up to degree level and get your CIPD qualifications whilst you're in work, which is wonderful. If you do choose to go to university, I mean, I actually did a business degree, which had a specialism in HR when I went to university. And the greatest of HR professionals have a wider understanding of the whole business, not just the kind of HR element. So my advice, if you want a career in HR, go and talk to some people that are in HR. And yeah, I would, you can choose any path, but recognizing that the more experience you have, the better HR professional you'll be.
Brilliant advice. Thank you. Now, slightly different questions for you. So if you were to set up a business now, what problem would you go out to solve?
What problem would I go out to solve? So I actually think some of the more exciting businesses around at the moment are the ones that are recognizing that the workforces of the future are going to look and feel very different. So businesses that are, how do we connect better and work collaboratively in these very remote and disconnected kind of way that we have. I think the world of work should look different as we go forward. You know, we've got environmental factors to consider. We've got a brand new context, not least that we've been through a pandemic or going through a pandemic. But I think new businesses now that can tackle that challenge would be amazing. But I mean, environmental businesses as well, you know, kind of regional agriculture, which is so key for us here. Kind of exciting innovation in agriculture, and kind of sciences and kind of medical technology. All of those are just really, really interesting areas of innovation. And I think we've got some exciting stuff coming up on our horizon, I would say.
Workforce as well, which is obviously your expertise. How do you think the workforce is going to change in, say, I don't know, let's say 2025? You know, how do you think we'll be working? Do you think it will be this hybrid approach we're in at the moment? Are we all going to storm back into the offices? Are we still going to be at home? How do you see it sort of planning out?
I'm hopeful that it will be a hybrid. So I think the danger is that we put the new world of work in the it's too difficult bucket, and we go back to kind of some crazy archaic way of going about the world of work. I think we should recognise that for businesses, having a hybrid is a way that we can embrace kind of flexibility, for people having kind of work-life balance. And actually that is a challenge now. We're in people's homes working all the time, but you know, there's a different way to think about work. And, you know, for a number of years, the HR profession, we've been talking about how do we help people bring their whole selves to work. And, you know, I rather flippantly commented at the beginning of lockdown, all we needed was to take work into people's homes to see their whole selves, because all of a sudden we were having meetings where people could have their children in the room or their dogs next to them, as mine does. And you know, it was we had very different context, and, you know, we could see into people's worlds a bit more. Hope that the world of the future means that we can connect in similar ways. I also think we can talk to far more people. We have less burden on the environment when we're not driving to a half an hour meeting down the road. But I do think we have to be really innovative about how we connect and collaborate with people, because, you know, some things will need to be in person because we need the energy and innovation that comes with kind of sparking off each other. Other times we need to just think about this virtual world in a different way. I have a lot of conversations where people say, we would love to do that, but we can't because we're in this virtual space and it's not the same. It isn't the same, but let's invent it to be different. I'd love us in 2025 to look back and say, do you remember when everything was virtual and we just got stuff done, and, you know, and we were just cracking on with it, and we were all on screens all the time, but it was actually quite an innovative time for us all. And I think that's what we'll be saying in 2025, I would imagine.
That's a fantastic insight. Thank you. Now, yeah, if I was a business thinking about setting up in New Anglia, or if I was a young person maybe considering to come here to go to, you know, one of our fantastic universities, or if I just fancied a trip here for a holiday or a break, and what advice would you give to people to draw them into Norfolk and Suffolk?
So I think we are an absolute hidden gem of the kind of UK economy with what we've got going on here. I would say there is so much unexplored, fascinating, interesting people and businesses and unique thinkers that exist in the region. And so I would say if you're thinking of coming to study here or set up business here, then there probably aren't many places quite like us. So we've got a bit of sometimes we can have a bit of an inferiority complex in New Anglia. I think sometimes we're a bit apologetic for who we are, but it's utterly extraordinary, the depth and diversity of what we've got going on. So if you imagine it, there's probably something going on somewhere in New Anglia. So it's about kind of how big is your imagination, because I think it's one of the places that is incredibly supportive as a region. And so if you want it to happen, it probably can around here.
Fantastic, thank you. And now I'm going to close on two final questions. So, you know, by the time your term at the left is up, you know, what do you want to have left behind? You know, what do you want your legacy to be? Which I appreciate sort of thinking about that, and you've only a few weeks in, is a big question.
Yeah, I would want people to look back on the time and say, actually in New Anglia, anything is possible. You know, you can be yourself, you can imagine something different, you can be innovative. And there is such diversity of thought and people and businesses and education that it's a really thriving part of the country. And so, but fundamentally, that people know around here anything is possible, I guess, would be what I would want. But ask me in 3 years whether we've managed that. Done in a year.
Final, far easier question. Yeah, I know you're quite a beer aficionado. You know, what's your favourite pub, and what would you tend to have down the local?
So my favourite pub is Number 11, which is in Diss, where I live. And I am a frequent attendee at Number 11. And my favourite beer, I don't know if I have a real Bitburger is probably my favourite, but I will drink any beer.
Brilliant way to close. CJ, thank you so much for coming on to Careers and Coffee. It's been an absolute delight talking to you and hearing about your fantastic plans for New Anglia. Huge thank you. Cheers.
Thanks, Jordan.
So folks, that was CJ Green, our new chair here at New Anglia, talking to us about everything from, you know, her advice to 14-year-old CJ right through to her plans for New Anglia Lab as well. As usual, we have a survey, so go into the description below, fill out our survey. It takes 20-30 seconds, just helps Josie and I think about the sort of guests that you want to see on Careers and Coffee. So that was today's session of Careers in Coffee. On Thursday, we are back with Richard Wood and Casey Bendel of Cheddar Creative, talking to us about their brilliant business based here in New Anglia. So looking forward to seeing you next Thursday,